Krishna. So on behalf of Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, thank you to all the devotees for joining. We'll start off by singing Jai Radha Madhava for the pleasure of their lordships. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Yashodhanandana Jaya Brajanarandana Jaya Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jai Radha Gopinath ji ki jai Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra ki jai Nitya Gaura Purnande Hari Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Hare Krishna. So before we begin Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, in the story format, we'll do Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshuramilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakammalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Dev Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priyam Vancha Kalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So for today's class, we'll be speaking about the Lord's pastime in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8. So this chapter, it starts off just before the end of Mahabharata, and the final rites are being performed by the family members of the fallen kinsmen in the Kurukshetra battle. Shukdev Goswami, he continues narrating in detail of the events that followed. So the Pandavas, they desired to deliver Ganga water to their relatives who passed away during the battle. They traveled with Draupadi to River Ganga, along with the women walking at the front. After lamenting over their relatives' bodies, they sufficiently offered Ganga water to them and bathed in Ganga. And the waters of Ganga, as mentioned in the translation, was sanctified due to being mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. Even today, in our Hindu culture, we believe that if a family member passes away, the family goes to the sacred river like Ganga to take bath, and each of the family member actually pours out a pot full of Ganga water for the departed soul and walks in a procession with the ladies at the front. So Hindus believe that this breaks the cycle of reincarnation, and for the departed soul, they will go directly to heaven. And just as a background to the appearance of River Ganga, so Lord Vishnu, when he appeared as Vamandev in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj, then the Lord, he extended his left foot to the end of the universe, and that actually pierced a hole in its covering with the nail of his big toe. And through that hole, the pure water of the causal ocean, it entered this universe as River Ganga. And having thus washed the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, which were covered with like a reddish powder, the waters of Ganga, they actually acquired like a beautiful pinkish color. And Shukdev Goswami says later that every living being can immediately purify his mind and material contamination by touching this transcendental water of Ganga. And yet still the waters remain ever pure even now. This is because Ganga directly touches the lotus feet of the Lord before descending within this universe. She is known as Vishnupadi, and later she also received names like Jahnavi or Bhagirathi. And so today is Makar Sankranti, so happy Makar Sankranti to all. And today is actually the day that Ganga came to earth. Another background to her appearance on earth was when Maharaj Bhagirath, he performed great tapasya to bring Mother Ganga to earth for the redemption of the 60,000 sons of Maharaj Sagar, who were actually burnt in ashes at Kapil Muni's ashram. So thus the ancestors were liberated. So even today, near Ganga, there is a Ganga Sagar Mela organized every year. So it's like another festival for them as well. And it is also said that these 60,000 sons religiously or symbolically represent our dull thoughts, and by working hard in devotional service, just like Mother Ganga did when she came from Swarga all the way to this material world, it said that it will enliven the life of everyone or anyone. Also on this day of Makar Sankrant, Bhishmadev, he also departed from this material world, and today was also the day when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he accepted the sannyas order of life to propagate the path of devotional service. So going back, Ganga is the chief of all the rivers, that are able to evoke one's sense in God consciousness or our spiritual cultivation, and she purifies one who takes bath in her holy waters. The Lord is also so kind to us that He has spread River Ganga throughout this universe, so that by taking bath in her holy river, everyone can get released from the sins and be free from all life contaminations and be relieved from all the material diseases. And so Srimad Bhagavatam, it also mentions that a person who regularly baths in Ganga is purified both externally and internally. So externally, his body becomes immune to all kinds of diseases, and internally he gradually develops a devotional attitude to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So an example is also written of a very respectable Brahmin in Kolkata. So he never actually took doctor's medicine, and even though sometimes he felt like really sick, he would not accept medicine from the physician, but he would simply just drink a little bit of Ganga Jal, and then he was always cured in a very, very short time. So going back, after bathing in Ganga, Maharaj Yudhishthir sat with his younger brothers Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Madhakunti, and Draupadi, who were all very overwhelmed with grief because this battle was between their family members and had affected all of them. And also the principal dead bodies in the battle were in some way or another actually related to each other. And therefore this was like a family grief, and it was all combined. And Lord Krishna was actually also present there. So as he was the maternal cousin of the Pandavas, nephew of Queen Kunti, brother of Subhadra, etc. So he had many relationships with the other family members as well. And the Lord was actually pacifying all of them, being very affectionate, compassionate, and he was consoling them like in a befitting manner due to this time of grief. So Lord Krishna and the Munis nearby, they pacified the members who were in shock by speaking to them of the strict laws of the Almighty, so the laws that Krishna made, and their reactions on the living beings. So we know that all the nature's laws, so the laws of nature, are created by Krishna, and we are like the insignificant beings that cannot change these laws. We just don't have that power nor the authority to actually do so. We are like the puppets in the hands of a puppeteer. So another example in Srimad Bhagavatam was when Narad Muni, while he was describing his previous life wherein he was the son of a maidservant to Vyasadeva, and says about his mother as follows. He says, "She wanted to look after my maintenance properly, but because she was not independent, she was not able to do anything for him." And also the world is under the control of the full Supreme Lord. Therefore, everyone is like a wooden doll in the hands of the puppet master. Also, the laws that Krishna makes are generally called dharma or religion, like we call them. And Krishna has verbally declared these rules or his orders in Bhagavad Gita, which is basically means like the Song of God, as a relatable example in our society. So we know that we have rules and laws, just that we need to follow as well during like driving, working, etc. And we know that we have to oblige by these laws and rules set out by the higher authorities, as they are only put in place for our safety, protection, and basically just to help us. But if we don't follow those rules, we can put ourselves and others in great danger or even face fines. So just like this, Krishna has put in place the laws of nature, and if we follow them, we will be happy, both materially and spiritually. And by doing so, by the grace of Lord Krishna, we are liberated from the clutches of this material world, the three modes of material nature, so that we can transcendently serve their lordships. Also, Srila Prabhupada, he mentions in the purport that once we give up this material conception of life, and we are reinstated in our original spiritual status, and then we can see the Lord. Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, he says, Devi hi esha gunamayi, mama maya durataya, mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. He says, this divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is actually difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto him can easily cross beyond it. And so, an example in Bhagavatam is given of Sudama, so Krishna's friend. So, we know Krishna, when he became king of Dwarka, and Sudama, he was just like a poor man, and he did not have anything at all. He had no money, no food to live on sufficiently. But he was constantly engaged in the devotional service to their lordships. He followed all the principles set out in the Vedas. So one day, what happened was, his wife, Sudama's wife, told him, see, Krishna is your very close friend, and he is actually a dear friend of yours. Why don't you go and ask him for some help? Sudama was a little bit shy. He's just like, how can I ask a friend for something? How can I ask him to help me? He didn't feel like doing it. In a way, he was very humble in that sense. But when there was actually no way to go, then he decided to meet Lord Krishna. He was deciding on what to give to Lord Krishna, because when you go to a person's house, you don't go that empty-handed. But he had nothing in his house. Then after some searching, he found at home that he had a few rice crisps like for him, and so he packed them in a piece of cloth that he had. He didn't have containers, so he packed it in a piece of cloth and took them to Lord Krishna. He walked all the way to Dwarka. So he entered the huge palace. It was gorgeous, it was beautifully decorated, and Krishna was sitting on his gigantic throne. And there were so many servants going all around him, helping him around. And the moment that Krishna saw Sudama, he rushed down. He just left everything and went running to Sudama. He later washed his feet and offered him his own seat. He put him on the throne of Dwarka. And then Krishna asked Sudama, what have you brought for me? So come on, you know Krishna is always hungry. He just loves prasadam. And Krishna is always really mischievous, like we know from his beautiful pastimes, that he likes to make fun all the time. So he said, what have you brought for me? And then he knew that Sudama was really shy from the side as well, and that he was trying to hide the rice crisp. So Sudama was thinking, how can I offer these rice crisps to Krishna? He's like from the royalty, he eats like shy food. But then Krishna grabbed hold of it and caught on, and then he just kept eating and eating it. He was in joy of meeting his old friend, so much so that Sudama also forgot why he had come there. He had forgotten to ask for like help from Krishna, and Krishna also forgot to give him anything in return. They actually both just forgot. So Sudama, he thanked Krishna and left the palace, and it is said that when Sudama went back to his home, he found the whole house was transformed, and he had all the riches in his house. His wife was even very happy. Somebody had come with a lot of gifts, and without asking or without giving, he had all of this. So we understand from this that Krishna is always present within our heart as the Paramatma, and anytime you need him, or anytime we need it, we can just pray to him, and he will take us out of the troubles and difficulties. He will just give us what we need. And this is why the victims of war, or the family members of the Kurus, when they were lamenting over the problems of death, and Lord Krishna, he pacified them with this knowledge, so that they can be liberated from the lamentation and illusion that they fell under, that their family members passed away. Because we know in this material world, no one can go past the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So we're just stuck here unless we take the shelter of Krishna. So with good and bad actions, obviously karmic reactions, they follow. Srila Prabhupada has given us a great example. So in the purport, he mentions of the days before the age of Kali, when it began. So long time ago, Brahmanas, the cows, women, the children, and the old men were given proper protection. And these were actually some of the main factors as to why there was so much humanity inside those days, and there was success in those kingdoms. But it's said that harming or insulting the creatures or entities is completely forbidden in the Vedas. And if someone takes up these sinful acts, one loses their duration of life. And again, because of karma. We know how Duryodhana and his men, so his party, cheated and unrighteously took the kingdom away from Yudhishthir Maharaj, and also how they roughly handled the hair of Queen Draupadi during the gambling. And by them performing such sinful acts later on in the battle of Mahabharata, we see, by the grace of the Lord, these cruel kings, their duration of life decreased because of their sinful acts. They were all killed timely. This again showed that the power of the nature of the Lord was really strong. Okay, so after Lord Krishna consoled the family members, he caused 3 Ashwamedh Yagyas, or whole sacrifices, to be conducted by Maharaj Yudhishthir, using clean substances or expert priests as well that he brought along from the highest order and to the precision in the Shastras. As mentioned in the Shastras, they followed exactly that way. And King Yudhishthir was also considering performing Ashwamedh Yagyas to get freed from the sins incurring from fighting with his own kinsmen and the other party, because they were all family. So we should know that just as a background for Ashwamedh Yagya, for Ashwamedh Yagyas, that the animals that were sacrificed in the Yagya were actually not killed. So if the Vedic mantras were properly pronounced during these sacrifices, it is said that the animal sacrifice would come out again with a new life. And that actually meant that the Yagya was successful. And so by performing the 3 Ashwamedh Yagyas and by being blessed by Lord Upendra or Lord Krishna, Maharaj Yudhishthir was bestowed with fame, just like that of Indra, or the king of heaven, who had performed 100 such horse sacrifices. And that's why Indra is also known as Shatakratu. And Maharaj Yudhishthir's virtuous fame, it was glorified everywhere, and it spread so far that it still remains intact to date for us to hear right now that we are. So the Puranas, they mention that by hearing the history of Pandavas, it also destroys the sins in us, because the Pandavas fought against the sinners and actually won over them. Srila Prabhupada writes that even though we know that Indra is more opulent than Maharaj Yudhishthir, the fame of Maharaj Yudhishthir was not less, because he was the pure devotee of Lord Shri Krishna. And Krishna is always equal to all, but for a devotee, they will get the full-fledged mercy of the Lord. So, of course, the Ashwamedh Yagyas nowadays, it would be very difficult to perform in this age of Kali. And that is why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given the easiest Yagya, the Sankirtan Yagya, to all of us. And Srimad Bhagavatam mentions that of all the sacrifices mentioned in the Vedic literatures, the performance of Sankirtan Yagya is the best. Even the performance of 100 Ashwamedh Yagyas cannot compare to the sacrifice of the Sankirtana. And according to the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, if one compares Sankirtan Yagya to other Yagyas, he is a Pashandi and is liable to be punished by Yamraj. So after the performance of the 3 Ashwamedh Yagyas, Lord Krishna then prepared for his departure to Dwarka. He was worshipped by the Brahmanas, but in the purport it also mentions that Lord Krishna, because he was a Kshatriya, it was not worshipable by the Brahmins due to the caste system back then. But the Brahmanas present there, headed by Srila Vyasadeva, all knew Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore they actually worshipped him. And then after being worshipped, Sri Krishna invited the Pandavas and reciprocated the greetings with them back as well as the Brahmanas. So the Lord observed all these social customs so that people like us will follow him in the future, so that we can follow his footsteps. So the devotees who are aware of Lord Krishna's transcendental form, they render service unto the lotus feet of the Lord. And therefore, the Lord also reciprocates by his causeless mercy, and thus delivers the devotees from all distresses. And even though Lord Krishna was physically reciprocating with them, with the Pandavas and the other members of the family, so he was physically present there. Now for us in this age of Kali, we can also have Krishna's reciprocation. We can still hear him, we can read about his glories and his transcendental pastimes, and then he will still reciprocate with us in a spirit, not as matter. So as we sincerely try to improve our chanting as well for the pleasure of Krishna, Krishna reciprocates with us, and we feel our greatest pleasure when we are doing the ninefold devotional service to the Lord. Sometimes some people may feel that there are too many problems going around in their life, and they might ask, why is no one actually helping them? Why is God not helping me? So in the Krishna book, Lord Krishna says that my devotees, they are very much attached to me. That's true. But sometimes I do not reciprocate their feelings properly in order to increase their love for me more and more. And this is because we may feel that Krishna can be easily approachable, like anytime, hey Krishna, I need help. But for example, an example is given that if a person initially has no money, he's always praying to the Lord for that money. But after some time, luckily he accumulates a lot of wealth. But then, unfortunately, sometime later, he loses it. But he will constantly be then thinking of his losses 24/7 on not being engaged in devotional service. And that is why Lord Krishna mentions, in order to increase the love of my devotees or his devotees, sometimes I appear to be lost to them, and instead of forgetting me, they will lose their sentiments for me increase. The loving sentiments for me will increase. And so after Lord Krishna bid farewell to the Pandavas, family members, and paid reverence to his own form as Vedvyas, and to the other Brahmins as well, along with Uddhava, Satyaki, and others, Lord Sri Krishna, he boarded his beautifully decorated chariot. As just he was about to sit down, he saw the pregnant Uttara Devi frightened and running towards him with great fear and seeking for help. Lord Krishna immediately just jumped out of the chariot and rushed towards Uttara Devi to see what was wrong to help her. And just as a background of who Uttara Devi is, so she was the daughter of Queen Shuddhasena and King Virata. So they were the royals of the Matsya kingdom, and it was their kingdom that the Pandavas spent a year in concealment during their exile. So during their stay at the kingdom as incognito, so no one knew who they were, the Pandavas, they worked in the palace just like ordinary people. And Arjuna, he actually taught Uttara how to dance, so the art of dancing that he learned from when he went to heaven. So one day, King Virat, he realized who Uttara's dance teacher was, Arjuna, and he immediately proposed to offer his daughter to Arjuna, but Arjuna was clarified to King Virata that Uttara is like a daughter to him, and he was also her teacher. So then Arjuna also proposed to make Uttara his granddaughter by marrying her to his son Abhimanyu. And Abhimanyu was the son of the Pandava prince Arjuna and Yadava princess Subhadra, so Krishna's and Balaram's little sister. So we know that during the battle, Abhimanyu attained Virgati during the fight in the Chakravyuh, as he knew how to enter it but not actually how to exit it. So just as another background, this was because when he was in the womb of his mother Subhadra, she was very inquisitive to learn about the military formation of Chakravyuh and how it works. So Arjuna was explaining the Chakravyuh to her, like the positioning and everything to her, and she was listening. But she was only listening to the part where how the warrior should enter that formation, but she fell asleep because it was nighttime. So she fell asleep when Arjuna was explaining how the warrior can exit it, and that is why Abhimanyu didn't know how to exit that Chakravyuh. So unfortunately, in this way, Uttara Devi was widowed at a very young age and carrying Abhimanyu's son in her womb at the time of his death. So now going to when Uttara Devi was running to the Lord with fear on her face, she reached the Supreme Lord and she began praying for him wholeheartedly. And so now this shows to us how all the family members of the Pandavas are completely dependent on the protection of the Lord. And we have to be fully surrendered unto him, because he's the only one that can help us in all circumstances. So Uttara Devi, she prays as follows: Uttara Vacha Pahi Pahi Mahayogin Deva Deva Jagatpate Nanyam Tvada Bhayam Pashya Yatra Mrityu Parasparam. She says, Uttara Devi says, O Lord of Lords, Lord of the universe, you are the greatest of mystics. Please protect me, for there is no one else that can save me from the clutches of death in this material world of duality. And she says, O my Lord, you are all powerful, and a fiery iron arrow is coming towards me fast. My Lord, let it burn me personally, if you so desire, but please do not let it burn or abort my embryo. Please do me this favor, my Lord. She knew that Lord Sri Krishna is the only shelter for her, and as she was in fear, and that is why she surrendered to Krishna, because as Srila Prabhupada mentions, one actually cannot save himself from the cruel hands of death in this material world without having been surrendered to the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. And also Srila Sridhar Swami says that apart from Krishna, there is no one devoid of fear. Even fear personified himself is afraid of Krishna. Sutta Goswami, who was narrating this pastime of the Lord, continued saying that when the Supreme Lord, Supreme Personality of Godhead, he patiently heard her prayers, he immediately understood that this was actually the work of Ashwatthama, the son of Dronacharya, who had thrown this Brahmastra to finish the last life in the Pandava family. So just as a background to this and as to why the Brahmastra was thrown, so towards the end of the Mahabharata war, Ashwatthama, while trying to avenge the defeat of Duryodhana and the Kaurava army, he engaged in war with Arjuna. So Ashwatthama had deceitfully killed the innocent young children of the 5 Pandavas and Draupadi, so while they were in sleep. And in order to please his friend Duryodhana, who wanted to see all the Pandavas finished before his last breath. However, he realizes that the Pandavas are still alive and that he had killed their sons instead. Then the cruel Ashwatthama releases the Brahmastra to fulfill his vow that he made to Duryodhana. And Arjuna, he sends his own Brahmastra to counteract the other one. But Vyasadeva, he stops the 2 lethal weapons from colliding because he knew how devastating it could have been for this universe. It could have potentially destroyed this entire universe. And therefore, Vedvyas here asks Arjuna and Ashwatthama both to take their weapons back. So while Arjuna did it successfully, Arjuna did not possess the required knowledge, and therefore he couldn't bring it back. So therefore, with his cruel intentions, he directs it towards the womb of Uttara Devi, which had Abhimanyu's child, or Maharaj Parikshit. He did it to actually destroy the Pandava heir, as he could not end the Pandavas completely. And Srila Prabhupada writes that the Brahmastra, which is one of the greatest weapons in weapons, so just like in the modern times we have nuclear weapons, but the Brahmastras have more radiation, heat, and they were much finer in size. So due to the lack of control, their normal nuclear weapons that we have now, they're blind and they will harm anything in its way. So regardless if the person in front is innocent or is the enemy. But once the Brahmastra is released from its marks, it marks its target afterwards, and it will only go to the target itself. It would not harm anything innocent or anything in between, just only the target. And it could penetrate even through the most protected places and would never ever miss the target. So Ashwatthama's evil actions and cruel intentions, they show us how in the material world of duality, everyone is actually envious of everyone else. So exactly at that moment, 5 piercing, burning arrows were rapidly also coming towards the 5 Pandavas. And for their self-protection, the 5 Pandavas immediately took up their respective bows and arrows. But Uttara Devi, she took shelter of Sri Krishna himself. The Lord is not partial, but he is more, like we discussed earlier, he's more inclined to his devotees that fully surrender to him. And that is why the Lord is the only shelter of fearlessness for the surrendered soul. We know that the whole family of the Pandava family is all devotees. They are a whole family of devotees. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, when he noticed the plight of the Pandavas and how the great danger was upon his unalloyed devotees who had the utmost devotion towards him, and when the Lord saw that there was no time actually for the Pandavas to get their arrows and counteract the Brahmastra of Ashwatthama, the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna himself, he took up his Sudarshan disc to protect all of them. And just as he promised in Bhagavad Gita that his devotees would never vanquish or perish. And Srila Prabhupada, he writes in the purport that the Lord took up his weapon even at the risk of breaking his own vow. As the battle was nearly done, he technically shouldn't have picked up his weapon, but this was the emergency, and this was more important than any vow. So Krishna is Bhakta Vatsa, like we know, or the lover of his devotees. And that is why he preferred to continue as being the Bhakta Vatsa that he is, rather than to be a worldly moralist or a person who never breaks the solemn vow. So as Maharaj Parikshit, he suffered the scorching heat of Ashwatthama's fiery astra that he threw, the Brahmastra, as it sought him even within the womb of Subhadra, or Uttara, sorry. In order to protect the last descendant of the Kura lineage, Lord Krishna, who resides within everyone's heart as Paramatma, covered the embryo of Uttara by his personal energy. And Maharaj Parikshit attentively marked the Supreme Lord coming to his rescue. He saw the figure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada, he points out that even in that helpless condition, the child Parikshit endured the unbearable temperature due to him being the great fighter by nature. The Lord appeared in a 4-armed form that was actually as the size of our thumb, and his beautiful body was transcendently blackish. His dress was a dazzling yellow, and he was adorned with a golden helmet and golden earrings, and the Lord was continually wielding his club in circular motions, like dispelling the blazing weapon's radiation, just as the sun dissipates the morning dew. Thus, although the supreme Brahmastra weapon released by Ashwatthama was materially irresistible and without check or counteraction, it was neutralized and foiled when confronted by the strength and energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So actually, the embryo within Uttara's womb was indeed incinerated, so it was like killed by the Brahmastra. But being the supreme magician, Lord Sri Krishna instantly provided Parikshit Maharaj with a second body. Then, as the wonder-struck child, so Parikshit Maharaj was looking at Krishna, Krishna also just suddenly disappeared out of his vision. And so after all good astronomical science that had gradually developed throughout the sky, the great-grandson of the Pandu was the last born. He was at last born. So greatly satisfied, Maharaj Yudhishthira then performed all the birth ceremonies that normally take place. And Bhagavatam says that Maharaj Parikshit was saved by the Lord because he is actually the pure devotee, like we know, and the last remaining descendant of the pious king Guru. And he would be known as Vishnu Rata, meaning the one who is protected by Lord Vishnu. as well as Parikshit, because when he was born, he looked around simply searching for that personality, for that face that he saw within the womb. So when he came out, he just wanted to see the Lord. He was just checking, is this the person that I saw? No, and then he just kept moving around. So he had the darshan of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Lord, within the womb, even before he took birth. And after that marriage, Parikshit, he no longer was interested in any other person or anything material. Therefore, his name became Parikshit. So the one who is doing like Pariksha of everyone. So a test of whoever he met, that if that was the Lord that saved me. And because he has especially been given the protection of the Supreme Lord himself, it's an indication that must be concluded that the child would be a first grade devotee or a Mahabhagavata of the Lord. So someone with all good qualities. So Mahabhagavat they are devotees who see everything in the Lord and everything of the Lord as well, and also see everything there as eternal relation, that has an eternal relation to the Lord. So basically stating that there is nothing within his sight except the Lord. So he looks to the right, left, up, down, Krishna is just everywhere. As for Ashwatthama, to punish him from the sins that he had committed, Lord Sri Krishna asked him to cut off the jewel from his forehead and roam around the world in search of sympathy, love, mercy, and peace of mind. And this curse proved to be more deadlier than death itself, because Ashwatthama knew that he is immortal, he is a Chiranjeevi. So he's one of the 7 Chiranjeevis mentioned in the scriptures. So there's Vyasadev, Hanuman, Parshuram, Vibhishan, King Mahabali, and Kripacharya. So just to complete the list. And so the loss of that jewel that was on his forehead made his state of mental alertness, like it was completely lost. He was so afraid of everything. And being like a Chiranjeevi, he shall have to carry this burden of these sins until the end of Kali Yuga. And Suta Goswami continues narrating the pastimes of the Lord and says, O Brahmanas, do not think this to be especially wonderful in the activities of the mysterious and infallible personality of Godhead, who is like the storehouse of all miracles. This is because the activities performed by the Lord cannot be actually understood by mundane entities just like us. But we need to understand that nothing is impossible for the Lord. As he is beyond our material conception, he is all-powerful, and by his own transcendental energy, he creates, he maintains and annihilates all material things. And although he is himself son, unborn, no one is actually equal to or greater than him. He is Paramatma, or the Supreme Atma. While he's the cause of binding us within death and birth, which brings us sorrow and misery, he's also the cause of releasing the moksha, like with moksha, by bringing us full knowledge and bliss. Okay. So with that realization of his acts, we think that I am the doer. Because of this, I have done this activity and I need to protect myself from an attack or this material world. So nor do we understand that the Lord thinking of this is mine, but we need to protect. So we need to have Krishna's surrender, and we need to have his mercy. So he will protect us from all the dangers. From this pastime of the Lord that we see the importance of being in the association of sadhus. When Krishna and the sadhus, they were educating the family members, and because they were grieving from the loss of their relatives. Srila Prabhupada also mentions that this clearance of the misgivings of material existence at once takes place by associating with the Lord's devotees, who are able to inject the transcendental sound into the depths of the bewildered heart, and thus one practically is liberated from all lamentation and illusion within this material world. So another point is being fully surrendered to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord and being fully dependent on him. and thus like the Pandavas, Uttara Devi, and all of their family members. So there's a nice example that is given as well of Narad Muni, the cobbler, and the Brahmana. So one day Narad Muni, he was traveling on earth, singing the glories of the Lord, and he came past a Brahmana who was reciting the shlokas of the Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, all off by heart. The Brahmana, when he saw Narad Muni, he paid obeisances to Narad Muni and offered him a seat. Then he asked Narad Muni a question. He said, next time you see Lord Narayan, could you please ask him when I will actually get liberated? So Narad Muni, he replied, he said, okay, I'll ask the Lord. So after that, Narad Muni took his leave, and then he passed by a poor cobbler who was sitting under a banyan tree. So the cobbler, he was chanting while he was working. So when the cobbler saw Narad Muni, he again paid his dandavats to Narad Muni and offered Narad Muni a nice seat as well. So the cobbler asked the same question. He said, Narad Muni, you're a great devotee of the Lord. When you see him next time, could you please ask him when I will be liberated? So Narad Muni again replied, he's just like, okay, I will ask him. So Narad Muni then left that place as well and reached Vaikuntha. So there he saw the Lord sitting on Sheshnag, and he paid his respectful obeisances to the Lord. And then he began to ask the questions. He said, oh Lord, while I was chanting and traveling through earth, I came across two people, a very learned Brahmana who knew all the verses off by heart, and a poor cobbler as well. But both of them asked me the same question. So they asked, and they said they wanted to know when they will be liberated from the material world. So the Lord, obviously he knows everything, and he told Narad Muni that, look, I will tell you the answer later, but now when you go back to them, they will ask you, as their first question, as to what I was doing. And so you will tell them that I was putting an elephant through the eye of a needle. So Narad Muni actually was really confused at this, but he took the permission of the Lord and then left to go to earth again. And he met the Brahmana first again. So who again pays his respects to Narad Muni and seated Narad Muni down and began to ask this question. He's just like, so Narad Muni, did you meet the Lord? And if you did you ask him my question? So Narad Muni replied, he said, yes, I did. So the Brahmana then immediately asked, he's just like, so if you did see the Lord, what was my Lord doing? Narad Muni then said, he remembered what the Lord had told him to say. He said, the Lord was putting the elephant through the eye of the needle. And the Brahmana got very, very upset. He was very angry. And angrily he said, you're lying. You didn't meet the Lord. How can this be possible? So please, next time when you really go to the Lord and you really meet him, please ask him my question again. And then, so Narad Muni, he left. So later he met the cobbler next, who again paid his dandavats and seated Narad Muni nicely and began to ask his question. So he said, dear Narad Muni, did you meet the Lord? And if you did you have time to ask my question? Narad Muni replied, yes, I did. And the cobbler then asked, so Narad Muni, I just want to know what my Lord was doing when you went there. Narad Muni was a bit scared to tell him in case the cobbler got really mad at him and hit him. But eventually he told the cobbler what happened. So Narad Muni said, the Lord was actually putting the elephant through the eye of the needle. So the cobbler joyously said, Aho Bhagyam, this is very wonderful. And then Narad Muni was actually just a bit confused again. He's just like, but how? How is this even possible? How can the elephant fit through the eye of the needle? It's so small and the elephant's so big. And so the cobbler said, that is possible. The Lord can do anything. Then he gave him an example. He's just like, so Narad Muni, look at this banyan tree, the big banyan tree that I'm sitting under. It's a huge tree. But it came from a very small seed. So if the Lord can place this huge tree inside this small seed, then how is it not possible for the Lord to pass that big elephant through the small eye of the needle? The Lord is the best and he's the most powerful amongst all. And then Narad Muni understood. Then he took his leave and went to Vaikunta once again. So after paying obeisances to the Lord, he said, "My Lord, now I understand." The Lord then replied, "Yes." So the Brahmana, although he knows the verses of the Puranas, Vedas, Bhagavatam, all off by heart, he does not have faith in me. But you saw the cobbler. He was just chanting, but he was chanting with so much faith. And so the Brahmana will have to take many more lifetimes to reach to me. But for this cobbler, because he has faith in me, this will be his last life, and then he'll come back to me. So just summing up today's discourse, there are a couple of lessons that we learn from Ashwatthama's character first. So due to the great sinful offenses that he committed to the Lord himself and also to the Lord's devotees, it was actually very difficult for him to take shelter of the Lord, like we saw. He also lacked tolerance and gratitude because he remained consumed in the fire of anger, envy. And so in the absence of tolerance, there is material bewilderment, and that causes us to entangle ourselves, and that's why he performed all these sinful activities. So there are also a few points that we learn from Uttara Devi. So she was an empowered devotee of the Lord, and she approached the Lord for protection even though her father-in-law, the mighty Arjuna, and his heroic brothers were present. Uttara did not even appeal to them. She should not even go to them for help, but she directly approached to the source of all strength, Sri Krishna himself, the Supreme Lord. Because Uttara knew that whatever protection her relatives were giving her or could offer ultimately came from Krishna himself and by his grace. And she was empowered to have strength because when she was praying to the Lord and having 100% confidence in the Lord that no matter what, he will save her. So whenever we face calamities in our life, we can also approach the Lord with full faith and completely surrender unto his lotus feet. Mature faith may generally change due to our perception on how we think of it to be as well, but spiritual faith is different. So Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, he describes spiritual faith as Shata Shabde Vishvasa Kahe Shudrida Nishchaya Krishna Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Kritahaya. He says, Shraddha is confidence, firm faith, that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. And so Uttara Devi's words inform us of her pure faith in Krishna when she says that there is no one else that can save me from the clutches of death in this world of duality. In the beginning of Bhakti Yoga, or transcendental loving service, there is faith that by directly engaging ourselves in the activities of Krishna consciousness, obviously by the nine folds of Bhakti, all our objectives will be fulfilled. We will eventually attain our constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Lord Krishna, and we will take pleasure in hearing and glorifying him in pure devotional service. Okay, so Hare Krishna. We'll pause here and continue with the remainder of the chapter tomorrow. So Krishna willing, hope to see you all again. So please forgive me if I made any mistakes. Thank you to everyone once again for joining. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Ji ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Samit Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Hare Krishna.